You've probably seen it plastered on park benches and social media. Reduce, reuse, recycle. These 3 words seem simple, but carry a lot of weight when it comes to environmental conservation and sustainability. Coming up, we'll talk about saving the planet one choice at a time. The I Wish You Knew Cafe is open. According to separate studies by NASA and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, many of the observed changes to Earth's climate systems are directly caused by humans. Since 1950 alone, the atmosphere and oceans have warmed and the amounts of snow and ice have diminished, and the sea levels have risen. Before I throw more information out there, first, let's introduce our panel.
Hey, I'm Christina.
Will.
Philip.
Kiera.
And I'm Mia. Despite scientific evidence showing that global warming is real and that we humans are causing it, a 2018 Johns Hopkins University study reveals that overall millennials demonstrate similar or less concern with global warming than older generations. So what's going on? Aren't we supposed to be the generation that cares about and fixes the climate change? Okay, Phil.
I would say yes, of course, right? This is just like another thing that we have on our desk that we have to take care of is the world, is saving the world too, and climate change. What I would say though, I think, there are so many different sides of it is like, I think it's natural for us to want to be able to have the same lifestyle that the people before us had, like our parents and past generations, but the reality is that all of the choices that we make as far as, the corporations, the products that we buy, the food that we eat, it all has an effect on the environment. And the reality is that the climate is warming. And I think at this point it'd be reckless not to take into consideration the effect that'll have on our future and all of those plans that we may or may not have.
What do you think we're doing as a generation? Do you really think that we are stepping up and fulfilling the role of, taking the initiative to make that change, or are we still living, and having and practicing things that are actually detrimental to our environment?
Right, because I know for me personally, I don't really think about it in a
Right.
sense. So when I have to actually sit down and talk about it, I'm like, what do I want to say? Because I go throughout my day thinking, okay, I try to recycle. I don't really throw anything on the ground, but I'm like,
It's bigger, but it's so much more than
so I'm
that.
like, what should we, what do we need to know? What do I need to know personally? Because I really don't pay attention to it. So I'm looking to you guys, teach me, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends. So, everyone, like I said, everyone kind of plays their part, but so whether you recycle or you don't recycle, but it's also, there's so much more involved in how do you recycle? What do you recycle? We all hear those stories about. And are you consistent
with your recycling?
But we all hear those stories that, even though you're recycling, it's all going to the landfill. Is what you're doing really making a difference in the grand scheme of things?
There is, and by the way, I'm Adrian, and I will be fielding any comments and questions that any of our viewers have. So if you want to join the conversation, come join. I'm going to be posing the questions to everyone, so y'all can answer as well.
Sweet.
But I think that, so for me, for example, not to get on my pedestal, but I try every day to, I think about the environment constantly. I don't turn on the lights if I don't need them. I use containers instead of Ziploc bags, just these little tiny things that, sure, maybe it's not making a huge impact in the long run. I'm not an oil mill, I can't make that big of an impact, but I want to at least lead by example so that other people can be like, oh, maybe I'll incorporate that into my life. It just drives me crazy that some people, especially our age, just don't care. Why?
I think it's oversaturation. I think it's a little bit of oversaturation. I think because you grow up in this environment, everyone is talking about so much. So you like I have a 6-year-old, and she learns about this stuff at school. Like we didn't really learn a lot about it, so it wasn't. So
Right.
you had to adopt it. It wasn't sort of beat into you. And
Innate,
so so she comes in, and she brushes her teeth, and she'll get mad at us because we don't turn the water off.
I know, I do that.
And it's like, but it makes me conscious of it. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, baby.
funny.
I will turn the water off.
No, but those things are so important, and she's the one who's going to be affected.
Right.
by it.
Right. Yeah.
But bringing it back to setting an example, there's little things that we can do like in our community also. I know in DC there are local conservation like communities to either help the environment with hands-on, and there are educational, like teaching the kids is definitely the first start, because what is there going to be left for this future generation? So
Right.
by 2050, how is our planet going to be? Like ecosystems are deteriorating. Last night, actually, I watched this environmental film called The Serengeti Rules. And it was honestly such a beautiful film talking about how these scientists came together and discovered something incredible with nature, and they found a rule about it, how it's gonna recover itself eventually.
Right.
But then there are some things that we humans do have to be involved, integrate, but there's some things we have to step back and be like, okay, there's things we have to
there's
do.
just so much. I mean, there's so much that has to be reversed. There's so much damage that's
Yeah,
been
right.
done
You have to
at
reverse
this point.
it.
And I think that our generation is the one that's going to be revolutionary in terms of fixing things. I think we all do our individual.
Right.
We all have our individual part. But I think that someone is going to be the one that will make solar energy. A common thing in our household, but it's our corporations that really do a lot of the damage.
Exactly.
And it's like,
because they produce things that aren't really like eco-friendly
Right.
and like great for them.
So maybe it's the
ways that
millennial
aren't
generation that eventually
Right.
will change that on the corporate level as far as regulations and more clean energy.
Long term,
Right.
there has to be a shift in the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Just like
Absolutely.
in our value system, like the excess and like the materialism that we're so into. It's gonna have to change, as so North America is 4% of the world's population, but we consume 25% of the world's resources. And there's just so many different sources, ways that we can educate ourselves on what's happening with the environment, and outside of the environment, a lot of these things like have an effect on us later on in life, and on our health. Just like changing our diets, like Adrian's talking about not meal prep necessarily, but just like the ways that we even like store our food. These things make such I think there's been a recent thing with straws, like those little straws that they serve in bars aren't allowed, are being made illegal.
Yeah, but
Phil will have to hold that
drinking out of
thought.
those
It's gonna take
It's not-
I always
You have to drink your drink really fast because your straw will melt.
Guys,
Like,
we're
feel
gonna
like
have
it's like a
to
thing.
come back to the straws, but we have to go back to break.
Word.
So let's take a break. So stay with us on I Wish You Knew. Welcome back to I Wish You Knew. Let's pick off where we left off. So let's go to straws.
So straws.
So plastic straws, guys, did you guys see that on social media, how everybody was reposting?
What are they even for?
Well, it's because how the
don't need
plastic's
them.
affecting our water ecosystem, especially so many species are starting to become affected chemically, and they're probably going to go extinct in the next few years.
Well, here's the thing. Why even drink? I don't drink out of a straw. I mean, I just think it's kind of weird to be a
not?
grown man
Why not?
sipping your drink.
But do you
I mean, I'm not a germaphobe, so I don't mind putting my mouth on the glass.
okay, so if you go to a fast
Drink
food restaurant or whatever and you get a cup, extra large, you just take the lid off.
Exactly.
And
Well, yeah, but rarely. But I rarely drink soda. So if I do go to a fast food restaurant, I really won't get a soda anyway.
So
Okay,
you drink
juice?
water.
So I mean, or I'll get
Right,
a bottle of
right,
water water or
So how does this
something else.
really affect what we're doing? What little effects will taking plastic out or doing the lights? How could we even spread the word more or telling our friends? What was your
I
idea?
think that people just shouldn't be turned off by it. We were just talking about the straws and how a lot of people don't really like using it because us millennials, we like to, go out, have drinks every now and again, and sometimes it might affect the way you feel at that moment and you just don't like it. But I just feel like us just trying to accept that people are trying to put in place something that's really important for the environment. I think that's one step, moving forward. We have to accept that this is happening.
I think that using the platforms that we have available and just pumping out education the same way we do with everything else, and making being conscious of the environment and a fad, and then push that forward. I think that the people, those of us that don't take it seriously or really acknowledge the impact that we have on the environment is more because of, it's more like an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing.
You live your daily life.
It's like, if I just do this one little, if I make this one little change, it's not going to save the world. I'm not going to cure world hunger.
It needs to be not going.
But the same way with voting, it's like, I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't count. So you think that you don't count, but it's those little things. If everybody does the little things, then it makes a big impact.
Exactly.
But actually, education is the key, and to make people actually have a conscious, to be aware of what's going on. We talk about, we were talking about eating meat earlier, and the beef industry, people don't realize has a tremendous effect on the environment, because we were talking about the methane gas that goes into the air and it kills the ozone layer,
we're talking about
which then leads to climate change and
certain
global
things
warming.
that upset our stomachs and produce certain certain reactions, bodily reactions. It's like this all of these, a lot of this feed that goes into these huge farms. I'm not talking about sustainable farming here. I'm talking about farms that I'm gonna go ahead and put some of these corporations out there, like a lot of these fast food.
If you ever seen a cattle farm,
where they source their
these things are huge.
It's like
they cover acres.
It's
And that's what we as the consumer can boycott those. I haven't purchased, I haven't eaten meat in almost 10 years, because to me it's you see what it's doing to the environment, and by boycotting it, you can drive the market in a certain direction, and it's worked. I mean, it's working. With Whole Foods now has these, they label if it's free range or if it's not. I don't think it's enough, because that sort of shift moves slowly, but we're being listened to. But another question is affordability. I mean, organic food, all this stuff.
That's
the socioeconomic implications of that.
Even so we do have electric vehicals, 100% electric vehicles.
You can afford that.
But they're way more expensive than getting a regular gas.
It will always be that way.
So I feel like if we're going to shift, I feel like there has to be some type of adjustment
legislation.
Yes,
No, but there are. It's like the Green New Deal.
Some people can't afford it.
Industries.
There
I mean,
is.
Well,
all of this.
because you're digging into people's pockets, and when their
Exactly.
money is in oil.
So you want them to change, but it's
Right.
can
and
they
oil
really
drives
change
a lot
if
of
they
our
don't have it?
plastics, our gas,
Right.
our
Something
tires,
solar
and
panels.
everything to build
You see those
anything to build a car.
Mass-produced agriculture.
Yeah.
I think it has to be a priority, like any other priority in our life. Like you just said, like a fad, Christina. If it's okay, I gotta go to the store and get this shoe, you know what I'm saying? So I can be out there, so I can, it should be it should be that way with food.
So personal adjustment, instead of going out and getting those shades, you could go out and buy something from Whole Foods.
You can afford it. You
can afford it.
I also think that you mentioned food, and we're talking about food and the environment and all that. I think understanding the food that you put in your body and how it affects your body, then you can connect to how it affects and impacts the environment, right? So if you know how bad styrofoam is, and drinking or eating out of styrofoam is for your body, you won't use it, and it's bad for the environment.
Right.
And if you know that drinking water out of glass is way better than drinking out of plastic, then you would now maybe get a filter and use a glass bottle that you refill. So it's really changing the way that we think.
So
But that starts at a younger level. Like we were talking earlier about you and because the first thing I asked you when you were talking about your lifestyle, I was like, did you just adopt that, or did your parents instill that in you?
Exactly.
And that's what it was. His parents were the ones who implemented those those
Yeah.
Right.
that awareness. Yeah.
Definitely.
So
And
definitely
speaking
with
of
younger
the shoe
generation.
thing too. Oh, I'm sorry, Mia. Go ahead.
Oh no, go for it.
I was going to say, speaking of, you talked about the shoes. I mean, the fashion industry is the second largest.
Source of
Yes.
pollution.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
impacting, and
Yeah.
it's wasteful. I mean, you
Yeah.
create all these new clothing for each season, and then they just throw them away afterwards. So,
Right.
purchasing your clothing secondhand, or purchasing
Think about it. It's
that-
like
that
it's
will
like it's
help.
like fast food clothing
it's fast clothing.
stores.
Yeah.
You know what I
that's the
mean?
name
It's like
industry.
it's like the same thing. It's like you can how many cheeseburgers can you kick out in 2 minutes? It's like
Yeah.
how many of the same striped shirt can you
Yeah.
make?
Exactly.
And it's
Made
just,
from
and it's
And
just
it's not
like
bio- it's not biodegradable.
Yeah, and like
Right,
at the end of the
right.
day, right? What happens to all this food or clothing that doesn't sell?
Exactly.
It's like where is it going?
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean? It's
yeah.
like I was talking with some coworkers on our way to lunch the other day, and he was just like, "Yeah, that's an incinerator." And I'm just like thinking in my mind because like I know there are these giant like trash islands, like a couple
Yeah.
like trash islands. Like one of them is in the Pacific Ocean, and all of this, there's all this like all this plastic in the ocean.
Yeah.
But point being is just like I think thinking about it, like not being afraid or like feeling some kind of weird way about having these conversations is really an important thing. I think that we need to be more open to to the information that's coming out of science and out of these different channels that we have available. To let us know, like, look,
Okay,
like,
Phil,
this is what's
let's
happening.
definitely
Yeah.
bring it back to that
Yeah,
because that's a
definitely.
really
That's a great
good topic. So we'll take a quick break. We'll continue this conversation when we come back. Welcome back to I Wish You Knew. We've talked about the negative impact that humans had on planet Earth, but what can we do as individuals on a daily basis to undo or at least lessen the harmful impact that we've done?
So
What
many
can we
things.
do?
So many things. Get a glass bottle. Get a glass water bottle. Like you can start there.
Yeah.
Right. That eliminates using plastic bottles, and that's plastic waste. So if you drink 4 bottles of water a day, you've saved, already.
Yeah, but where are we getting this water? Like we're getting a glass bottle.
Right. Get a filter. Get a water
so that's
water
another-
filter. Yep. A filtration
another
system.
investment.
There's so many different types. They have the one that
But
you
it's
can put on the
talking
sink.
as far as like investments, it's like
Yeah.
it's like it might be a little investment for a longer term.
It's 20.
Exactly.
Okay,
And I don't
it's
think a lot of
$25 to
people
get a
realize
filter
that.
and
Exactly.
$5 to get a bottle.
Right, exactly.
That and
So
and
it's
you'll
like,
have
what,
water
like,
for the year.
How many?
Yeah, but you gotta, peel that into a lot of people's minds because a lot of people are used to buying cases of water for like $2.
Yeah.
Right?
See, I think
like
here's
bad. It's
here's-
bad.
Tooth for
It's
free.
easy to get
Here's
caught
something
up
to
in
think
it.
about. Here's something like, so you just graduated with your master's degree, right?
Hey.
Like I said, I think the next wave of industry is going to be how this generation really makes a change.
Exactly.
And when it's time for our 16 to 17-year-olds to start thinking about what they're going to study in college, that's where we need to push them into. Renewable energies, solar energy, all that stuff that's really going to make a difference. And the more people that you have in that particular area of study, the more changes we're going to have because you're going to have people who are going to be ready to do that type of work.
We just got to be ready to change people's mindsets because, you got to think like,
Exactly.
I want to go back to the filter because it's like we have water that's going into a filter, but it's like a lot of people might think, can I trust that? I would rather it be bottled and kind of have this idea of
Right.
knowing that it's a little bit more cleaner than actually coming out of the sink.
And
You know what I'm
having
trying
had
to say?
sat in the sun and the
That's what I'm saying.
chemicals
We gotta
from the
change
water
people's
bottle
mi-
are inside the
There you
water.
go.
You can't
Change their
see it.
mindsets.
And it's
Yeah.
like we even have to say that, Kiara. Like we have to change people's minds.
Exactly.
This isn't an opinion.
Right.
Like
right.
me saying that, I don't believe in God. There's not a lot of proof. There's not a lot of these little things. Like there's certain opinions out there, but these facts are true.
Right.
The climate is changing.
Yeah.
And the fact that people
Drastically.
tiptoe around that and are afraid, it's not a political left or right issue. It's a
It is,
fact.
yeah.
Adrian, that's my point about that's okay. So this is a great segue into like what you're saying. Okay, so like that's why I'm saying like the culture has to shift, right?
Yes.
Because from a young age, globally, people are across different cultures. People are introduced to the concept of God, right? So culturally, across the world, we need to be introduced to the concept of climate change, to the reality of climate change. Yeah. Will saying that that's something that is actively happening in younger generations. Thinking about how us as millennials are affecting change or using that information. I mean, I don't know. It's like I just think the first thing is like spreading awareness, accepting it as a reality, like you say.
But you were talking about globally, and that's the thing. We kind of tend to keep ourselves siloed to what's going on here in the United States, but climate change is affecting other countries a lot more than it's affecting us
in
terms of rising water.
We're not living in it physically.
Well, we are. We don't see the changes.
Well, we can see the changes just like right now. Like
maybe not as quickly.
We didn't have a spring.
Yeah.
But look,
we got
we're
floods.
talking about we didn't have a spring, but you have people that are saying we don't have water.
Right.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Right.
You can go in the bathroom and turn on your faucet and water comes right out.
Every day I take a shower, I thank God that I've got this water because there are plenty of people who don't.
living in, the fact that the world is changing.
Or where
The
you're
climate is changing.
living in a place where your local economy is dependent upon like agriculture.
Right.
And like 1 degree, one degree increase in the temperature can affect everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, our
like,
farmers our farmers right now are not making money because of climate change. They're not being able to grow crops. They're not being able to harvest at time of harvest because they haven't been able to.
But also politically,
harvest. Yeah.
having people
Because of
that
flooding
that
and-
represent us like within our democracy, presidents that don't believe in climate change, it doesn't make any sense. Definitely doesn't make it any easier. And but seriously though,
I feel you.
what is it like that the leader of our country doesn't acknowledge climate change? What does that do to people? Like,
So it's up to us to really fight for that and spread the words in
Exactly.
casual conversations.
Because it's education.
It is.
It goes all back to education.
Yeah, because you've got people who say, because it used to be called global warming. Right?
Yes.
Exactly.
And you're like, oh, well,
What is
it was so cold this
Yeah,
winter.
like
So obviously the planet's not getting.
Yeah, don't say.
Right. But what about those 10 storms you just had in the past month? They
How
don't
do you
think of, they
explain
don't
that?
equate
Right.
that,
How
right?
do you
So
reconcile
you had to
that?
change it to climate change in order to appease the non-believers.
Exactly.
But
So it makes
those are
sense.
actually very different. Like global warming is just what's going on, and like the industrial, like the gases are entering our ozone layer. But then climate change is really that phenomenon that we visually see of like disasters are happening back and forth. The weather's constantly changing. Like in the past, 100 years, the temperature has changed like 2 degrees, but that is such a drastic effect
change.
that it's what's going to happen.
Not only that,
in
but the
future
sea
with
level's
that.
rising, and the fact that we may not see this now, but the people who live in those areas, they see it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you live in Florida, in South Florida, and you know that there's a lot less land than there used to be 20, 30 years ago, and it's until people those people who live in those areas that are directly affected really need to stand up and say, hey, look, this is happening.
We don't see it.
We need to,
because-
right.
There's a
Because
cool
we're in-
organization called We Are Earth. That's basically like a organization of celebrities that have gotten together behind this issue, and I think they source their information from NASA and a few other channels. And there's a statistic coming out of that foundation that says that we have 12 years. A 12-year timeline before the effects of climate change are irreversible.
And I think that's what we need to be pumping out there into the world, like scare them, mess out of them, like, oh my God. So
No,
that forces people to step up and educate themselves a little bit more and now start making some changes.
Yeah, because they can scare us with other facts
Right.
about certain things, and you like,
Oh yeah, because
God.
fear is
But
a
we're
big,
always
fear is
planning, like,
always
what are we
the
gonna
thing
do?
that
What is
motivates
the-
people.
Exactly.
So that's the
Why are we
plan.
not
Let's
scared
get
about this?
together and scare the world.
But honestly, it's like these are great ways, like these are great reasons to get involved in the political process. And I think as a millennial generation, we might have taken the back seat on a lot of issues growing up, not have felt like that we needed to be as actively involved. Because things weren't like
Great
people, we weren't
conversation
we
about
didn't have to
the-
worry about
Yeah.
people coming to our schools
Yeah.
and
Great
trying to hurt
conversation,
us
guys,
or
because
whatever.
we have to save this planet. It's up to our actions to make a difference.
No, it literally is.
So that's all the time we have for now. Thanks for watching I Wish You Knew. See us next time.